Amazing twist, barista serves coffee to a stranger, revealing his hidden billionaire past. The rain pattered relentlessly against the cafe windows, each drop matching the steady thrum of Jake's anxious heart. At 38, he had poured every ounce of himself into this little cafe, grateful for the warmth it shared with the town, but underneath his inviting smile lingered a shadow of uncertainty. The cafe was more than a job, it was his lifeline, a place where he could turn heartbreak into steaming lattes, and it was now teetering on the edge of crisis. As the bell above the door jingled, a drenched figure stumbled in. Jake glanced up, wiping his hands on his apron, attentive to the new arrival. This stranger, with tousled black hair and piercing blue eyes, ordered a simple black coffee. Jake noted the rough edges of his jacket, the kind found in thrift stores, and something in his gaze, a mix of weariness and determination, captivated him. They exchanged words over steaming cups, and with every interaction, Jake felt a flicker of connection. Jake shared snippets of his life, how he cared for his ailing grandmother, the long nights spent perfecting his coffee and finding joy in the laughter of regulars. But as he listened to Alex's stories of distant lands and adventures, Jake couldn't shake the anxious gnawing in his gut. Here he was, struggling to keep the cafe afloat, and this intriguing stranger seemed to float through life effortlessly. Doubts crept in, plaguing his thoughts. What if Alex, despite his mysterious air, was just another fleeting connection? Just as he let himself enjoy the moment, reality crashed over him. Customer counts were down, the rent looming larger every day, and holiday cheer felt heavier than usual. Before they dove deeper into conversation, tension lanced the air, and Jake's mind raced. Was he really prepared for what was at stake? The cafe wasn't just his livelihood, it was a legacy. He felt torn between loyalty to his struggling staff and the tempting idea of partnering with Alex, who mentioned investments like they were magical spells. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Returning to the cozy warmth of the cafe felt like a sweet relief, yet in the backdrop loomed unanswered questions. Alex leaned closer, pulling Jake into his world for a moment, a life once filled with riches but tainted by betrayal and heartbreak. The revelation pierced through Jake's initial intrigue like ice water. Could he trust someone so deeply entwined in both extremes of wealth and loss? Suddenly, amid Christmas lights flickering outside, the door swung open to a group of investors, sharp suits contrasting coldly against the cafe's homely charm. Each one carried an air of urgency with them, plans in hand for a factory expansion that threatened to uproot the soul of the town. In a split second, Jake's heart raced in dread. He was faced with a decision that weighed heavily, threatening to unravel everything he believed in. The stakes were rising, the warmth of coffee and laughter faded as uncertainty and fear crashed together in his mind. He felt suffocated, caught under the crushing weight of loyalty, friendship, and the haunting specter of sacrifices he might have to make. Would he give in to the cold allure of wealth and security, risking everything he held close? Gazing at Alex, torn between the comfort of his current struggles and the unknown promise of wealth, Jake realized this moment would define him. And just like that, the air thickened with unspoken words, leaving him clamoring for a choice he never wanted to face. Would he cling to the familiar or venture into the depths of uncertainty? Jake stood behind the counter, the aroma of freshly ground coffee enveloping him like a warm hug, yet it felt suffocating too. His mind raced, darting between Alex's intriguing tales and the stark reality of the investors who had just walked in. Their sleek suits and sharp intentions clashed violently with the cafe's rustic charm, heightening Jake's sense of displacement. He glanced at Alex, whose casual demeanor seemed to suggest he was unfazed by the anxious energy swirling around them. "You okay?" Alex asked, his voice low but steady, as if he could read the tumult in Jake's eyes. The question hung there, raw and probing. Was he okay? How could he be okay when everything he cherished was slipping through his fingers? The café wasn't just where he worked, it was his refuge, a canvas painted with cherished memories of laughter and camaraderie. Each cup served was layered with emotion, a small piece of himself tangibly delivered to his customers. He couldn't let it all disappear in a transaction, no matter how sweet the deal might be. Yeah, Jake mumbled, forcing a smile, but his heart pounded with discontent. He caught a glimpse of the investors poring over their tablet screens, faces set in grim determination. With their focus elsewhere, Jake felt a sudden urge, a fleeting fantasy of rebellion rose within him. Could he stand his ground? He needed to dig deeper, not just for the café, but also for himself. You've mentioned investments, Jake said, sincerity lacing his tone. Are you looking for ventures in this area? Because if you're here to improve the town, I might need to know more about your intentions. Alex's focus shifted from the window to Jake, an expressive flicker in his eyes that suggested empathy, yet it was the hardness of resolve beneath that intrigued Jake even more. Not quite what most people envision, Alex replied carefully. I have no intentions to buy anyone out, I want to create value, not just profits. But this town's heart, the café, is a big part of that. Jake felt a shiver run through him. Here was someone offering a choice, an open door to an unknown future, but it wasn't a one-way street. It was threading a needle between hope and compromising everything he stood for. Did Alex believe in his vision for the café, or was this simply another stepping stone in his expansive journey? Had he grown accustomed to moving on from one place to another, leveraging connections until they no longer served him? Glancing back at the investors, Jake observed their calculating interactions, confident in their privilege. He felt a prickle of resentment against their invasive presence. Did they see the café as an opportunity or just another commodity to exploit? His thoughts churned, and as he met Alex's gaze again, he felt an unexpected spark of clarity. If we were to partner, I wouldn't want it to change what this café means. It's not just coffee, it's a lifeline for people, a home. With those words, Jake realized he was not just speaking to Alex, he was affirming his values to himself. Amidst his fears and doubts, he felt a flicker of conviction ignite within. The time had come to define his terms. He could collaborate, but on his terms, reflecting the café's legacy. But before he could voice the newfound strength, the investors approached the counter, their interest unmistakable. We need to discuss a potential acquisition, one of them stated flatly, as if delivering a decree. Jake's heart sank, they were taking the initiative. Would this be his moment of truth, or would he capitulate under the pressure of their demands? A decision needed to be made. Would he confront them, or would he rely on Alex's undefined promise, venturing into uncharted waters? Time slowed, the weight of impending choices tightening around him. Jake took a deep breath, the air heavy with opportunity and fear, bracing himself for what would come next. The moment of truth had arrived. Would he cling to the comfort of his café, or would he risk everything for the possibility of something greater? The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, as Jake met the investors' expectant gazes. He struggled to ground himself amidst all the noise their presence generated. It wasn't just about a business deal, it was a confrontation with his identity, his fears, and the dreams he harbored for the café. He straightened his back, his mind whirring with calculations. What exactly are you proposing? He asked, trying to sound as confident as possible, though his voice betrayed a slight tremor. The counter felt like a flimsy barrier, a small safeguard against the oncoming storm of their intentions. The lead investor, a man whose sharp-cornered smile offered little warmth, leaned forward slightly. We see potential here, a community staple in need of modernization. Our vision involves injecting capital that could refurbish this place, boost its presence. Revenue could skyrocket. Jake's pulse quickened. It was tempting. He could envision shiny new fixtures, an expanded menu, a bustling clientele. But would that come at the price of the café's soul? He was more than just a manager, he was a steward of its essence. The laughter shared over steaming mugs and quiet moments spent reading by the window were irreplaceable. What about the people who come here? Jake countered, his voice barely concealing the urgency beneath. They aren't just customers, they're a community. This cafe has a rhythm, a heartbeat. You can't just inject capital without considering that. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Jake, he said, as if lecturing a child, business isn't about sentimentality. We optimize it simple. You either evolve or you perish. Jake felt anger rising within him, alongside a trace of fear. Was this the reality of business? One that disregarded the human elements he valued? He had always viewed the cafe as a haven. To sell it, to exchange its warmth for sterile efficiency felt like capitulation, a betrayal to all the memories housed within those walls. Before he could respond, Alex's casual tone shifted into something more deliberate. You might want to reconsider your approach. The cafe's charm is its authenticity, not a marketing tool. People don't just come for the coffee, they come for the experience. The investors exchanged glances, skepticism lined their brows. A flicker of gratitude surged through Jake. Alex wasn't just an ally, he was an advocate for the values they both cherished. Taking a deep breath, Jake seized the moment. I need time to think. This isn't just an asset to be assessed, it's a living space. Amusement flashed on the face of the lead investor. Time isn't something we can afford. Our offer is time-sensitive. You must realize what you're dealing with. Jake's mind raced. All his instincts screamed to push back, to fight for what mattered, yet an icy knot of fear held him in place. This was a decision that shaped not only his future but the soul of the cafe. Here's the deal, he blurted out, surprising even himself. I want to hear your proposal in detail, but it has to include a way to preserve the essence of this cafe. What's your next step? If you're serious about creating worth, prove it. Their expressions shifted, the initial confidence now obscured by a flicker of uncertainty. Jake felt a spark ignite within him, tangible, fierce, and unexpected. He was asserting himself, peeling layers off his fears. Perhaps he was learning to negotiate on terms that felt right. With his heart racing, he felt a rush of possibility. They might take him seriously, they might see him as more than just a barista. He tasted not just the air thick with coffee but the zesty essence of hope. But just as the investors were poised to respond, a loud crash sounded behind Jake. A customer had dropped a tray, sending mugs clattering, and he turned instinctively toward the chaos. In that split second, his mind sparked with a revelation. What if he could learn to harness this moment, to navigate crises and negotiate the path forward? Jake faced the investors again, resolve hardening in his chest. Though uncertainty loomed ahead, the threads of opportunity wrapped around him tightly. The moment had come to not just safeguard his cafe but to rise above the circumstances. Would he emerge as a leader, or would this be another chapter of hesitation? As the din around him subsided, he prepared to embrace what lay beyond this moment. Whether success or failure, it was his to own. But first, the weight of the investors' response hung in the air, leaving Jake questioning not only the fate of the cafe but the depth of his own courage. Would he find the strength to stand tall, or was there still a part of him that feared the change he both sought and dreaded? The silence in the cafe felt like an impending storm, charged with a tension that prickled at Jake's skin. He returned his gaze to the investors, who wore expressions of mild surprise mixed with calculation. It was as if they were gauging him not just as a business partner, but as a character in a play that they directed. Your conditions are interesting, the lead investor replied, his tone dropping a level of warmth that Jake couldn't help but notice. But understand this: a deal cannot be forged under sentimental premises. You may find that the cafe's charm is a fleeting quality in the business world. Jake's resolve wavered slightly, and with it, doubt seeped into his confidence. Was he truly prepared to fight these professionals with their slick, calculated games? It was easy to preach about community, but they had resources, a vision, and the experience to execute it. The stakes were higher than he had anticipated. But then, he remembered the faces of the regulars, the elderly gentleman who sat in his usual corner reading the newspaper, the young couple who had shared countless first moments over cups of coffee. This café was more than numbers and projections, it was these lives woven into the fabric of every wall and table. Perhaps I'm making my stance too emotional, Jake said, defying the tightening knot in his gut. But what if we find a way to modernize while keeping the heart of the café intact? Maybe we could work together on a plan that highlights our strengths. The investors exchanged glances once more, pondering his suggestion. It seemed as though Jake's words had struck a nerve, an unexpected perception that the café had layers they hadn't considered. Here was a chance for him to redefine the conversation, make it about collaboration rather than dominion. Collaboration is appealing, the second investor said, his lean frame relaxing marginally. But it requires a clear outline. What would that entail, Jake? How would you preserve the essence in practical terms? The question ignited a brainstorm in Jake's mind. Flashes of possible strategies surged forth: community involvement in decision-making, a loyalty program celebrating longtime patrons, local artisans contributing to the café's decor. Each thought crystallized into a vision, and within him, a flicker of authority began to glow. Let us meet with regulars, gather their input. We could host an event that brings the community together to shape our vision. The hearts that beat in this café will dictate its future, Jake suggested, an assertiveness enveloping his being. The lead investor pursed his lips, a look of defeat creeping onto his face, as if trying to reconcile Jake's burgeoning confidence with his initial plans to bulldoze through. You're suggesting a grassroots approach in a capitalist framework. It's unconventional, but it's grounded in real relationships, which can equate to loyalty and revenue, Jake interjected, surprised by his own audacity but somehow feeling invincible. People will support what they love. We can create an experience that draws not just the casual customer but advocates for the café. The investors remained silent, and Jake could feel their skepticism evolving into an acceptance of this new narrative. The power of the discussion had shifted. He was no longer the hesitant manager but a visionary for his own café, retaking the reins of his destiny. As they debated the feasibility of concepts he was now actively formulating, another crash interrupted them, a glassy sound that sent shivers down his spine. He turned quickly, instincts on high alert. A shadow loomed at the entrance, and as he squinted past the gleam of the café's light, he recognized a familiar figure: Jenna, one of his former baristas, standing there with a look of urgency in her eyes. "Jake!" she called, breaking through the layered atmosphere thickening with potential resolve. "You need to see this." Time seemed suspended as a whirlwind of confusion enveloped him. What could possibly require Jenna's urgency in a moment that felt rife with opportunity? Would this revelation steer him toward a new direction or derail his newfound confidence? Jake took a deep breath, the stakes rising higher than ever as he prepared to face whatever awaited him at the threshold. They had already thrust him into the ring of business. Now, he was about to discover if the next round would shatter his resolve or set him on an even more powerful path. Jake's heart raced as he glanced back towards Jenna, her face a canvas of urgency and distress. The moment felt like a junction. One path led toward resourceful collaboration, while the other swerved into chaos born from her unexpected visit. He excused himself from the investors and approached her, the faint scent of coffee mingling with anxiety hanging in the air. "What is it?" Jake asked, forcing calm into his voice despite the tremors of uncertainty licking at his resolve. Jenna stepped closer, lowering her voice. "It's about the café. There's been news, some troubling rumors about another raid on local businesses. It's starting to circulate, and it might affect us." The words clawed at Jake's insides. The café stood as a sanctuary for patrons seeking solace and community. He had just begun to embrace a new vision, one highlighting the intertwining lives within. The thought of an external threat, one connected to fear and loss, felt parasitic, draining his newfound confidence. Raids? As in? He stammered, trying to process the implications while suppressing a rising wave of panic. Like we might get targeted, Jenna pressed. It's not just about the cafe. It's bigger than that, it's about our identity and values, and you know how easily people jump to conclusions. Jake felt the weight of her words resonate deep within him. The investors had barely come around to the idea of valuing the cafe's sentimentality, and now the very essence he sought to preserve might be at risk. The encroaching threat festered doubt, causing him to question if his plans were resilient enough against unforeseen adversity. Looks like we might need to rethink our approach, he realized, taking a step back to regain perspective. This was a defining moment, a test of his capacity to lead under duress. He couldn't let fear dictate the narrative, he had to become the protector of his vision. I won't let fear dictate our direction, Jake declared to Jenna, a newfound determination sparking within him. We need to rally our community now more than ever. If they see we're standing firm, they might rally around us. Jenna nodded, her demeanor shifting toward steadfastness that mirrored his own resolve. Are you sure you want to pursue this in front of the investors, though? Wouldn't it be better discussing this privately? Jake pondered her question, weighing his options. He could retreat to a place of safety and formulate ideas among trusted allies, but would that not reinforce the exact vulnerability he wished to abolish? Instead, he envisioned confronting the investors with a bold plan, one built not just on resistance but on inspiring unity amidst the uncertainty. We can integrate this into our next discussion. If I show the investors that our community stands together, it might solidify my argument and validate our grassroots approach, he articulated, ringing with certainty that surprised even himself. All right, Jenna replied, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. Then what do we do now? Instead of standing in fear of the potential dangers, Jake would orchestrate an interactive space for patrons, a meeting to discuss their concerns, to engage with their emotions, and to strategize about a form of collective protection. People would realize just how much their connection to each other mattered when faced with a common threat. It was more than keeping the cafe's essence alive, it was about fortifying the roots of everything he believed in. Jake moved back towards the investors, calling for attention. I'd like to pivot our approach, he announced, feeling adrenaline course through him, mixing urgency with focus. Recent developments in our local area have illuminated a pressing need for community integrity and support. This cafe not only represents a business but a lifeline to the people who love it. Together, we can strengthen bonds and create something that truly reflects this. Their faces looked intrigued, but Jake sensed skepticism still lurked, an insulation against emotional appeals. In a time of uncertainty, let us show them we're more than just a place to grab a drink. Let us send a message that we value our community and their input, he insisted, determination framing his stance. A pregnant silence fell over the room before the second investor lifted an eyebrow, curiosity peaking. What are you suggesting? He asked, a spark of interest in his voice. Jake felt the rush of possibilities flood his mind as he prepared for the next leap. This was his turn to challenge the conventional notions of business. Let us engage the community in shaping our future, together. Would they embrace his vision, or would they stick to traditional views and relinquish their investment in him? The tension moored him to uncertainty, yet his heart resonated with purpose. And deep down, Jake realized that this was more than just about the cafe, it was about defining who he was as a leader. As he awaited their responses, he wondered what sacrifices lay ahead for unveiling this potential, and whether he was truly ready to risk it all. Jake's anticipation hung palpably in the air, mingling with the scent of fresh coffee. The investors exchanged glances, their curiosity battling against skepticism. In that moment, he realized that this was the precipice not only for his business but for his own character as a leader. Engaging the community? One investor finally scoffed, adjusting his tie dismissively. Do you really think that's a viable strategy? Businesses thrive on numbers, not on heartstrings. Jake clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to back down. This was exactly the type of challenge he needed to confront. With his emotions simmering beneath the surface, he reminded himself that this wasn't just a sales pitch, it was a manifestation of his deeper values. I do think so. Our cafe isn't just about profits, it's about connection. The people coming through those doors have stories, dreams, and fears just like us. Ignoring that would be a disservice to all parties involved. Skepticism still rippled across the room, but there was a shimmer of intrigue in the investor's eyes. What do you propose? A town hall meeting? He asked, crossing his arms. Yes, Jake replied, his voice steady despite the quickening rhythm of his heart. I want to invite people to share their thoughts, fears, and visions. A two-way conversation rather than a monologue. This isn't merely a strategy for today, it's a foundation for how we can make our cafe a staple in the community. The investors began conversing amongst themselves, a murmur of doubt mixed with consideration. Jake could sense the room shifting slightly, and his resolve deepened. He continued, you say that businesses thrive on numbers, but community connection results in loyalty, resilience, ghosts of economic downturns. If they see us prioritizing their voices, we won't just survive, we'll thrive. As he spoke, Jake felt an odd mix of fear and exhilaration. It was a moment of profound vulnerability, yet it was also empowering. He wasn't just protecting his cafe future, he was igniting a message deeply embedded in his values. Suddenly, someone spoke up from the back, a voice full of uncertainty. And what if this backfires? What if the community turns against us instead of for us? Jake felt the weight of the question settle on his shoulders, a challenge to navigate. The possibility exists, yes. But I would rather risk facing fallout trying to do what's right than sit idle, fearing the unknown. A tension hung in the air as he locked eyes with the soft-spoken investor again. There was a spark of understanding beginning to flicker. In that stare, Jake saw an invitation, an opportunity to prove that fear of loss was never as profound as the fear of never daring to dream at all. Let us say we proceed with this, the investor finally answered, a hint of curiosity threading his voice. What's the first step? A meeting, as you suggested? Yes, Jake said, his stomach churning with excitement and apprehension. I'll speak with our regulars, invite others to join. We'll make it an open space for everyone, customers, neighbors, anyone who feels connected to the cafe. We need to establish this environment of support and transparency. The investors nodded, albeit cautiously. They were still skeptical, yet he planted a seed of intrigue that might blossom into something substantial, potentially reshaping their beliefs about business ethics. As he left the meeting, exhilaration coursed through him. Yes, there would be uncertainties ahead. It would take effort to build trust and foster a genuine connection, but he felt emboldened. He'd taken the first major step navigating through fear, both for himself and for the cafe's future. Now, standing outside, the evening sun bathed the street in golden light, bathing his worries in warmth. Perhaps there was more at stake than he had initially realized. This was more than just his cafe, it was about constructing bridges rather than walls, a personal mission encoded in his own fears of disconnection. But what remained unclear was how the community would respond. Would they embrace this bold new direction, or would doubt overshadow any genuine effort? Jake inhaled deeply, aware of the next challenge looming, a public forum, vulnerability on display. The road to understanding was fraught with resistance, and he wondered, could he bear the weight of every voice, even the dissenters? As the sun set, he realized it might take an unexpected ally to navigate the complexity of this venture. But who would that be, and what surprising connections awaited just beyond the door of the cafe? The next morning, anxiety stroked Jake's stomach as he walked into the cafe, the familiar aroma of brewing coffee intermingling with the taste of uncertainty. Today, he had promised to speak with the regulars, to gather opinions and fuel the dialogue about their impending community forum. Each step toward the service counter felt laden with unshared queries. How would his patrons respond? Would they see value in sharing their stories? The cafe was alive with chatter, sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating the faces of familiar customers. He poured coffee instinctively, but his thoughts drifted. Jake could hear snippets of conversation, laughter mixing with the clinking of mugs and plates. As distractions flitted around him, he wondered if anyone could sense his inner turmoil. "Hey, Jake," greeted Lisa, the college student who frequented the cafe for her study sessions. She waved her hand, her friendly smile radiating warmth. Jake returned the smile but felt the walls of his self-doubt closing in. "Lisa, do you have a moment?" "Sure, what's up?" He motioned for her to sit at one of the tables. "I'm trying to engage the community more, create a dialogue about what they want from this space. I want to invite everyone to come and share their thoughts." She looked thoughtful, tapping her fingers against the table. "I think that's great, but do you think they'll actually show up? People are busy. It might be hard to get them interested, especially if they feel it's just another meeting." A biting truth lingered in Lisa's observation, and Jake felt momentarily deflated. What if I told them it's not just a meeting? That it's a chance for them to shape the space they enjoy? Maybe frame it as a listening session rather than a meeting, she suggested. That way, they know they'll actually get to talk. Jake admired her crisp perspective. "That's it. I'll emphasize that." "Thank you." "Of course. Are you going to ask everyone?" "Yeah, I want to make it open to all, not just regulars. Anyone who feels connected to the cafe." A silence settled in as he drafted a mental plan for his outreach. The unpredictable nature of reaching out haunted him. How could he assure they were heard? Fear crept back into his consciousness, so he steered the conversation toward lighter topics, but her suggestion lingered. After a few engaging conversations with other patrons, Jake found himself approaching the back table where an unfamiliar man sat alone, scribbling on a notepad. The man's unassuming presence contrasted sharply with the chaotic energy around him. Jake approached cautiously. "Hey, sorry to interrupt. I'm Jake, the owner. Do you come here often?" The man looked up, a hint of a smile gracing his lips. "Not really. I'm new in town, but I've heard good things. Glad to have you. I'm actually trying to organize a community forum to hear from everyone about what this cafe means to them." The man raised an eyebrow, curiosity peeking in his expression. "That sounds interesting. What kind of feedback are you hoping for?" Jake considered the question. Did he even know? "I'm hoping for sincerity, really. I want this place to be more than just coffee, it should feel like home." "Interesting perspective," the man replied, jotting something down. As they exchanged thoughts, Jake felt an odd connection forming. Why did this stranger evoke a sense of familiarity? His mind wrestled with the moment, hoping to uncover something extraordinary. Hours later, Jake earned an unexpected ally in this newcomer. The conversation veered toward potential challenges, with Jake confessing his doubts about managing dissenting opinions. The stranger, whose name turned out to be Connor, shared insights rooted in a profound understanding of community dynamics, revealing a surprising depth of experience. But it was when Connor casually mentioned his past ventures that Jake sat up straighter. Traces of billion-dollar deals floated beneath the surface of his casual dialogue. A sense of urgency surged within Jake, mingling excitement and apprehension. What was the real intent behind Connor's presence? As Connor smiled, seemingly reading Jake's thoughts, Jake's mind whirred with unease. Was this man simply a benevolent observer, or was he a complication lurking behind a friendly exterior? The day wound to a close, but Jake found no reprieve as he mulled over his next move. Would he dare to delve deeper into discovering Connor's background? As he stared out the window at the bustling street, the weight of uncertainty turned heavier, and he questioned if true vulnerability required navigating not just community connection, but the complexities of unpredictable relationships as well. Who was this stranger, really? Would their budding friendship be an ally or an unforeseen complication in his pursuit of connection? The next morning, the sun cast long shadows through the café's front windows, and Jake's internal landscape mirrored the weather. He stood behind the counter, brewing coffee, yet his mind was entangled with thoughts of Connor and what their conversation had ignited within him. The idea of organizing a listening session felt more urgent than ever, but the lingering sense of uncertainty gnawed at him like an unwelcome guest. The café buzzed with the usual morning energy as patrons filled their seats, yet Jake felt isolated. He had made progress in reaching out, but each interaction now bore the weight of expectation. What if they didn't see the value? Would his attempt to foster dialogue be met with indifference? He glanced over at Lisa, who was poring over her notes again. She caught his gaze and smiled, prompting him to approach her table. "How's the planning coming along?" she asked, eyes bright with curiosity. "It's complicated," Jake admitted, leaning against the table. "I spoke with a new customer yesterday, Connor. He has some surprising insights, but it's made me question how to leverage that knowledge without coming across as insincere or manipulative." Lisa furrowed her brow. "Why would you feel that way? You're trying to improve the space." "Sure, but what if it's just me pushing my agenda?" The words tumbled out, revealing vulnerabilities he hadn't fully acknowledged. "I'm still wrestling with the fear that nobody really cares about what I want this place to be." "Jake, you need to remember that you're not alone in this," she reassured him. "Your desire to hear from them, that's the foundation. Everyone wants to feel heard. Just focus on creating a comfortable space for them to share." "Creating that space feels a lot like pushing against a wall," he said, frustration spilling over. "How do I invite people in while still honoring their time and boundaries?" "You'll never know until you try," Lisa replied, her voice steady. "Maybe invite a small group first, test the waters. Build curiosity. You can adjust from there." Her confidence instilled a newfound determination within him. "You're right. I can start small. Maybe I'll talk to Connor again today, see if he would be willing to facilitate or share his perspective." As the morning shifted into the routine of lunch, Jake felt the adrenaline of purpose stir within him. With a plan sketched in the back of his mind, he approached Connor's table, his heart pounding with anticipation. "Hey, Connor. Mind if I join?" "Not at all," the man replied, curiosity glinting in his eyes. "What's on your mind?" Jake took a breath, grounding himself in the moment. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day about engaging people and creating dialogue. I want to start small." Connor leaned back, fingers steepled. "Small is good. How are you planning to do that?" "I was thinking of inviting a few people for a casual chat, nothing formal. Just a listening session to understand what makes this cafe significant to them. You mentioned community dynamics, would you be interested in helping me facilitate that?" Interest flickered across Connor's face, but he hesitated. "Sure, but there's a lot that can go wrong. You might be surprised by what people really think." "Good or bad, I need to know," Jake countered, feeling a surge of resolve. "I want to commit to this. Not just for me or my cafe, but for them. I can't ignore their feelings anymore." Connor studied him, and Jake could almost see the calculations running through his mind. "All right, count me in. But we need a strategy. You need to prepare for the resistant voices and the constructive criticisms." Jake nodded, thrilled yet apprehensive. In that moment, he recognized a shift within himself, an embracing of discomfort as a path toward growth. He was turning the fear of failure into an opportunity for evolution. As they mapped out a potential structure for the session, a new level of energy flowed between them. Yet, just as excitement surged within him, an insidious thought crept in. Jake grappled with the implications of putting his vulnerabilities on public display. Would people truly engage with honesty, or would they hide behind polite facades? The afternoon's vibrant activity faded, and Jake's resolve began to waver when Connor tapped his pen on the table, drawing his attention back. You realize, Jake, that your biggest challenge might not be the attendees, it could be your perception of yourself as a leader. Jake felt those words seep into his consciousness like ink spreading on paper. What do you mean? Leading means embracing the uncertainty of others' views while maintaining your authenticity. Are you ready for that? In that question lay the heart of his journey. Jake stared out the window, reflecting deeply on the path ahead. Could he fully embrace the potential for vulnerability, even if it meant facing uncomfortable truths? A shiver of possibility electrified the air as Jake wrestled with the decision lying ahead. What if this wasn't just about the cafe? Would he be willing to confront his own fears as he sought to understand others? The challenge to define himself awaited, and as he prepared to navigate this new territory, the real question loomed larger than ever. Could he truly lead a dialogue if he struggled to understand his own voice? Jake stood at the counter, his hands shaking slightly as he prepared a batch of caramel macchiatos. Behind the comforting clatter of cups and the soothing hum of the espresso machine, his mind raced with the implications of Connor's insights. Each drink felt heavy with expectation, as if they were not just beverages but tokens of a burgeoning transformation. As he poured the silky foam, he pondered his conversation with Connor. The notion of authenticity weighed heavily on him. Could he really step into a role of leadership, knowing that his voice trembled beneath the surface? Today felt different. He was standing on the precipice of some profound change, and the prospect both excited and terrified him. He glanced around the cafe, studying the faces lost in conversations, buried in their phones, their laughter and whispers blending into the background symphony. Each person represented a story in essence he longed to tap into, but doubt gnawed at him. What if he was unprepared to face the truths they would share? In the midst of his brewing, a familiar face entered, Connor. Jake wiped his hands on his apron, nervous energy coursing through him. "Hey," he greeted, attempting to keep his tone casual. "Ready to strategize for our session?" "Absolutely," Connor replied, taking a seat at the bar. "First, let us carve out the basics. What do you envision as the purpose?" Jake inhaled sharply, relishing the challenge. "I want it to be a space where people feel comfortable sharing what the cafe means to them. Not just as a hangout but as a part of their lives." Connor nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Well, that's a solid start. But do you know what you plan to do if the feedback you get isn't what you expect?" Jake hesitated. The prospect struck a chord of vulnerability in him. "I know I need to be open to criticism. I guess it's just intimidating. I've always wanted to be liked. What if they don't connect?" Connor leaned forward, locking eyes with Jake. "You can't control their response, and worrying about rejection only stifles your authenticity. Remember, it's about the community's perspective, not about individual validation." Jake felt an electric jolt of realization. That was it. If he placed the focus on their stories rather than his fears, perhaps he could lead with honesty and courage. "Okay, let us prepare for resistance," he said aloud, a newfound determination building inside him. "What can we offer them to encourage genuine feedback?" As they discussed possible ground rules, Jake realized that he wasn't just drafting logistics, he was forging a bridge to awareness. The notion of creating a dialogue became more than just a plan. It started to feel like a calling, a moment where he could break free from the self-imposed chains of doubt. "Let us use an icebreaker," Connor suggested. "Create an environment that promotes openness from the get-go. Maybe start with something like, what's one thing you love about this cafe? And what's one thing you wish could be better?" A rush of clarity washed over Jake. He could envision the format, the eager voices blending together, each story lifting a different veil of anonymity. It would allow them to step into shared vulnerability. Perhaps doing so might even allow Jake to face his own doubts amid the flow of authentic expression. Their planning session took shape, and as they continued, Jake spotted a familiar customer, a woman who often visited in the afternoons, diving into book after book. Her quiet presence had always intrigued him. What wisdom might she bring to the conversation? Could we perhaps invite regulars like her? Jake asked, gesturing subtly toward the woman whose laughter always seemed to light up the room. Definitely. Diverse voices enriched the conversation, Connor affirmed, his enthusiasm contagious. With their strategy locked in place, Jake felt a surge of excitement. He was transforming fear into purpose, ready not just to organize but to engage. But as they wrapped up, a nagging thought crept back in: what if the very act of searching for deeper understanding unearthing personal wounds? Wasn't he ready to confront? Jake prepped the cafe for the evening rush, his heart hammering with a fusion of anxiety and anticipation. The air felt charged, foreshadowing a pivotal moment in his journey toward self-realization. As he wiped down the counter, the door swung open, heralding a streak of cool wind, and in walked a stranger, dressed in an impeccable suit, with an intensity that suggested an agenda. Jake's stomach dropped. Was this yet another challenge to his newfound ambition, or an unexpected twist that might change everything? The man's eyes scanned the room before landing on Jake. He approached the counter with a purposeful stride, leaving behind an unsettling aura that made Jake's pulse quicken. "Jake, right?" he inquired, his voice smooth yet commanding. "Yeah," Jake replied, instinctively straightening. "Can I help you?" "I'm Dean," he introduced himself, extending a hand with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in control. "I'm part of a consortium interested in revitalizing local businesses. I wanted to discuss a possible investment opportunity here." Jake felt the ground shift beneath him. Just when he was preparing to engage his community openly, this slick businessman waltzed in, presenting an opportunity, yet also a challenge to the ethos he wanted to uphold. "What kind of investment?" Dean leaned against the counter, tapping a finger thoughtfully against his chin. "We've identified this cafe as an essential part of the community, a perfect candidate for our initiative to modernize local businesses. We can bring in capital for upgrades that can increase foot traffic and profits." Jake felt the tension constrict in his chest. Here was an offer backed by dressed-up promises of transformation and success, yet it felt like a cheapened version of the vision he had started cultivating through vulnerability. "I appreciate the interest," Jake began carefully, "but I'm working on creating a space that truly represents the community, and I'm not sure that aligns with your goals." Dean raised an eyebrow, clearly unaccustomed to dissent. "You're not seeing the bigger picture. Communities thrive on innovation. Why keep your cafe in a rustic frame if modern upgrades can help it flourish? You could double your profits while preserving your past." The seductive offer threatened to breach Jake's newfound resolve. But rather than fearing this moment, he summoned courage from within. "What I'm realizing, Dean, is that the essence of this cafe isn't just about profit or aesthetics. It's a fabric woven from stories and connections, something that cannot be commodified." A flicker of annoyance crossed Dean's face, and for a moment, Jake feared he had crossed a line. But as he stood firm, he felt the slow unfurling of his beliefs. He continued, "I'm inviting the community to share their stories so we can shape the cafe's future together. Rather than seeking external validation or financial shortcuts, I want authenticity to be the cornerstone of our progress." Dean tapped his foot impatiently. "Authenticity doesn't pay the bills. I'm offering both a security blanket and a chance for growth. Why would you decline that?" Jake inhaled deeply, the air thick with conviction. "Because I don't want to sacrifice our soul for short-term gain. This cafe is more than just a pocket of profit, it's about relationships. I refuse to exchange that for an algorithmic increase in foot traffic or galleries of pristine decor." Dean's composure faltered, perhaps sensing that Jake was no longer the uncertain proprietor he had first encountered. "You might regret this decision," he warned, straightening his tie, a chilling note in his voice. "Maybe," Jake replied, locking eyes with Dean. "But I'd rather face potential regrets of failure than drowning my unique voice in a sea of half-hearted commercial endeavors." As the door swung shut behind Dean, Jake's heart surged with a mixture of defiance and elation. He had faced the fear embodied by Dean and stood his ground. In that clash, he understood something profound. True leadership was about defining boundaries and standing firm in one's values. The evening approached, and as he mentally prepared for the upcoming listening session, there was an undeniable shift within him. An evolution had unfolded. He was no longer just operating a café, he was protecting a legacy, his passion, and the lifeblood of the community intertwined through shared narratives. That night, as patrons gathered in eager anticipation of the forum, their friendly faces sparked a sense of anticipation that felt electric. Jake took a deep breath, the weight of responsibility entwined with hope. He stood at the helm of the adventure he had initiated, ready to embrace the stories that would flood in. When the lights dimmed and the conversations began to unfold, Jake felt an overwhelming sense of pride ignite within him. There was vulnerability in opening the floor to others, but as voices melded into a chorus of sincerity, he understood that this was the essence of leadership, creating a culture of empowerment where everyone mattered and no story went unheard. Through the discussions that evening, Jake's confidence solidified, and he began to grasp the profound truth buried within Connor's initial challenge. Leadership wasn't merely about taking charge, it was about relinquishing ego in favor of collective wisdom. As the final strains of laughter and connection lingered in the café, Jake felt an immovable sense of accomplishment. They hadn't just discussed coffee or profits, they had forged bonds and ignited a collective sense of purpose that breathed new life into the space. He was finally the leader he had longed to be, the protector of his community's heart. With resolute grace, he embraced the fulfilling aftermath of authentic connection, his confidence now unshakable. This wasn't merely a success for the café, it was personal growth climbing from the shadows of self-doubt into the bright embrace of courageous leadership. Jake smiled warmly at the gathering, the echoes of their stories reverberating with promise. This was where he had always belonged, at the intersection of community, authenticity, and spirit. As he raised his cup in a toast, he knew one thing: he had conquered his fears and forged a path toward a brighter future, not just for himself, but for everyone who cherished this café. The second chance he had fought for wasn't merely about survival, it was about thriving in truth. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.